Hello, good morning to everyone, and welcome to this session. We are talking about overcoming challenges, lessons from other sectors, but also not just other sectors, certainly from education and some of the other sectors that are related to education. I'm Elizabeth King. I'm the Global Director for Education at the World Bank, and I'd like to invite the panelists for this session to come to the stage, please. We heard from this wonderful opening session we had earlier about the importance of innovation to addressing the challenges in education. But we also indeed heard from from the panelists the importance of leaders and innovation leaders. And what we have on this panel are people who have been innovating in education. So I'm going to turn to each one of them, maybe first to say something just to warm them up, to say 2 sentences about themselves, to introduce themselves to you as innovators in education. I'm going to start with Mrs. Irene Ovonji-Odida.
Thank you, Dr. King. My name is Irene Ovonji-Odida, Miss Irene Ovonji-Odida. I'm currently the chairperson of ActionAid International, and as has been introduced, I'm also a human rights lawyer from Uganda. My involvement in development work has been for a number of years, working on issues to do with trade justice, but also through ActionAid, which works on, its mission is to fight poverty and to promote development by fighting poverty. We work on education, health, particularly HIV/AIDS, women's rights, food security. And so it is through the work of ActionAid that I've been involved in issues to do with education.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Jonathan Mitchell.
Thank you, Dr. King. My name is Jonathan Mitchell. I've been working in international development and humanitarian assistance for the last 30 years in various parts of the world. I currently work for CARE International as Chief Operating Officer. CARE is an organization that has been focusing for over 60 years on international development and poverty alleviation. And certainly we have learned that when we're talking about leadership and innovation, it really is the leadership of the people, the communities, and the partners that we work with in countries around the world that is the most key to success.
Senator Boerke.
Good morning, everyone. I have been a social entrepreneur in 3 ways. First, as a teacher. A professor is a social entrepreneur. We produce knowledge with our students. Second, I have been involved in NGO. One NGO working with children in education. And third, I'm a politician also. As a politician in both executive branch and legislative branch, I have been involved executing some programs and proposing and implementing some laws regarding social affairs, especially education.
Thank you very much. When Senator Boerke introduced himself just now, but also to me earlier, he introduced himself as a social entrepreneur, which actually surprised me a little bit because he's from government. But yet he's introduced himself as a social entrepreneur. So I would like to ask Ms. Ovonji-Odida, does she consider herself to be a social entrepreneur in education in her job?
Thank you very much. Actually, I have some difficulties with the term, partly because I feel the challenge really is to understand what is the difficulty, what is the constraint affecting education or any other issue of development, and finding the solution to that is a process. So perhaps I don't quite put myself into a box, and I think the terminology, but also part of the challenge for me, in addition to that, is that in dealing with issues of education, I feel there's a need to have an integrated approach that looks at the issue very holistically, and that sometimes by focusing on certain terminology, one may miss some of the aspects that go into solutions. From our perspective as an organization with ActionAid, our focus much more is around looking at issues from a rights-based perspective, which brings in the element of different sectors playing a role: the governments, the civil society, the private sector, and so on. So I would not want to categorize myself as a social entrepreneur, but rather say that I'm involved in mobilizing societies in civic action to achieve a particular goal in education.
Thank you. Now I'm going to make it a little bit harder for John Mitchell and ask him, do you feel that it's a box? By asking you if you are a social entrepreneur, am I boxing you in terms of categories?
I think it can be. I think using terms like this perhaps are useful in trying to synthesize some of our learnings, so that we can understand from the different examples of the work that we are all involved in, what are the key things that we can distill out. But I think the most important thing, though, is to keep focused on those real cases of where we've overcome challenges, working, as Irene said, with a variety of different players in overcoming challenges of development. And, I think there are many ingredients to that. There's first of all, the need to really have a felt need that this is a key problem that a community is facing, whether it's education or another development challenge. It's not something that should be just imposed from above. It has to come from a real feeling of communities themselves. And then the passion and leadership that we often see is with people in their communities, leaders within their communities who have mobilized change. And NGOs and governments and so on are really, in some ways, the back players, if you like. We're supporting and mobilizing those processes, but the leadership often is coming very much from the communities and the people that we're working with.